Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. And once again, I'm here. Headway is still in Mara, and no good internet connection, so it's going to be me and our guest today once again. We've been talking to people from most likely from either from India or from Asian continent most of these last few weeks. So we have a change this time. In fact, I was struggling to understand how to pronounce our guest name today. So it's Ignacio Yufera, an amazing photographer. His works has been published in National Geography, BBC, and many other fabulous magazines. And his works personally, such great works of wildcats and a lot of other species. So um, even with the cover shot which we were publishing in Paws Trails to share this particular session, you can see two amazing cats in that picture. That itself is enough to talk about his works. So let's welcome him. And he also ran, like us, he also ran travel and photography operating company as well. So in case if you would like to, check any of the places which he is a master in, you can definitely get in touch with him as well. I'm talking a lot right now. Let me introduce him so that he can tell us his story, how he got into wildlife conservation, photography, travel industry, everything from his side. Hello.
Hello, good
How are you?
afternoon from Madrid, Spain, where I
Great.
am now for the holidays. This is my home country, although as you know, I've been living in Panama for the last 6 years now.
Great.
Yeah, so good
Great.
afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, good evening. We have all kind of international audience, so people from different part of the world. So
Sure.
how are you? And if we can start with a small story, how you got into photography and out of any other segment, wildlife.
Well, I got into photography when I was very young, and I was studying in Paris, in France, and I studied photography as a side interest to the degree I was studying, which had absolutely nothing to do. But even though I was heavily into animals at the time, I've always been into animals, even since I was a toddler. My photography interest wasn't exactly wildlife. I was more into street photography, portraits, that kind of stuff. Because you have to keep in mind, you're probably too young to remember, but this was back in the analog days. Digital wasn't still born. So wildlife photography was something very, very difficult that only a very few very dedicated and specialized photographers could do at the time. So I used to travel a lot with my photo gear, and I took some animal photos, but it wasn't really my specialty. And then one day, all my photo gear got stolen
Oh,
when I came back from one of my trips to Western Africa. And so I stopped taking photos for quite a while. And even though, again, I was still heavily into animals, and I've always considered myself a wildlife and nature enthusiast. And then digital came. Digital, in the early 2000s, late 90s, and as digital photography started to develop, I saw the usefulness of digiscoping. You probably have heard of it, attaching a digital camera, which back in the day were still quite primitive, to a spotting scope, especially for bird photography. So I started again taking photos as a side interest to my birding and my bird watching. Okay, but as it happens, and many digiscopers will agree with me, the moment you start taking photos again and those photos start looking good, you want more. You want, and you become very quickly, you become aware of the limitations of digiscoping. You cannot shoot moving subjects. You have very little control over depth of field, and You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So in almost inevitably, I got my first digital DSLR, which was Canon, and
Mm-hmm.
then this was, I don't know, I'm terrible with dates and periods of time, but
Same here.
oh, 15 years ago, something like that. So I started working with Canon,
Uh-huh.
and then I got
Okay.
again heavily involved in photography. I started taking it very seriously and
Mm-hmm.
spending a lot of time, almost all my free time, taking photos of wildlife, mostly in
Oh.
Spain and Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Africa, which from Spain is relatively
Yeah.
accessible, and I spent a lot of time in Morocco. Uh,
Okay.
and very quickly, I started to be very interested in wide open spaces. I mean, my main focus of interest in terms of habitats were
Okay.
wide open spaces like deserts, high mountains,
Okay.
tundra, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And,
Okay.
uh, and then I moved to Canada. I moved to
Oh,
Canada
great.
and I spent about 3 years in living in Calgary in Alberta. Which I mean, you told me you're in Edmonton now.
Yes.
You know,
This morning.
well, Alberta is just a wonderful, wonderful place. I became totally in love with Canada as a country,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
with their people, and of course the wildlife. It was amazing, especially coming from Spain.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have to understand that in Spain there's been so much hunting throughout the centuries that
Okay.
animals and wildlife are terrified of people.
Okay.
Terrified of people. So it's almost impossible to do anything photography wise unless it's done from a height, from a blind, as they say.
Okay.
So it's very difficult to approach wildlife. Very difficult. So when I started living in Canada, I was amazed by the accessibility you have to wildlife. You only had to, I mean, particularly from Calgary, you could drive less than an hour, being
Oh,
Kananaskis country, and you could see bears, wolves,
yeah.
coyotes, of course, deer, elk, moose. It was just fantastic, and you have all this megafauna, and
Yeah.
uh, and it's so accessible, and you can go into the parks. You can do pretty much anything you want within, of course, certain limits, and there are rules that you have to comply with. But you have a lot of liberty, a lot of freedom of movement inside
Yeah.
the national parks. Something which is, of course, very different to Africa
Yeah.
or even to Europe. In Spain, there are very few places where you can go and start walking on your own, looking for wildlife. Yeah. So I was very happy in Canada for a while,
Okay.
and then my main interest was the megafauna and the landscapes.
Okay.
We're talking moose, the deer, the
Yeah.
bears. I was completely in love with bears. I spent so many hours photographing bears and bison. I was completely transfixed by bison. Uh, and yeah, I mean, I spent 3 years there taking a lot of pictures. I don't know if I should start sharing
Yes,
the
please, so that we
presentation
can go
so I
story
can
by story.
illustrate. Yeah, so I can illustrate this a little bit with. Okay, how again?
Yeah, you can click on the share. I think you just need to click on the presentation right now. You haven't selected the presentation. So once you have the presentation, then we are good.
Ah, okay. So I have to select it.
Yes, select it, play it from the screen. I mean, right now, uh, if the presentation which you have done, I can see you are selecting.
Yes.
No, but we are still back in our screen. So the presentation screen you need to see.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Share screen and then
Slides or video file?
no slide. No, the
Slide.
same share screen. You were selected, before we started the presentation, and
For
now.
some reason, for some reason,
Mm-hmm.
no. Again, it takes me to a. I have to select a file.
The PPT, yeah,
Oh,
which
it's
you
too
go.
big. Oh,
Just need to open it. You don't need to upload it anything or anything. Just need to open it.
I'm sorry.
You.
I just
Oh,
I'm
that's fine. That's fine.
I go to my computer, and then it forces me
Uh,
to
no,
upload a
no,
file.
no, no, no. The share you don't need to click on the slides. You can click on the share screen button itself. You don't need to upload it in that way.
Share screen.
Yes,
Select window or screen.
yes, yes. And the presentation window.
Ah, okay, okay, okay.
Got it?
Yeah, okay. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's fine.
Sorry about that. It's my first time with this.
No
Yeah, this
worries.
thing.
No worries. Yeah.
Okay. So can you see the images now? The three images?
Amazing, amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so this is what I did when I was in Canada. This is what I was after.
Oh,
Big
great.
big North American mammals in their wonderful natural settings of the Rocky Mountains and the Rocky hillsides and the
Yeah.
prairies of Alberta, and I don't know, it was just wonderful. And all these animals are relatively easy to approach. And again, I became sort of a big trophy photographic hunter. I was always
Photography.
after the
Okay.
biggest
The moment
elk.
you say trophy, you get panic.
Yeah, exactly. The biggest antlers, the biggest horns, the biggest bull I could find.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time in the Arctic, in Nunavut, and I also the good thing from Calgary, you could travel almost anywhere in North America. It was very easy. So I went to Alaska many times. I went to Nunavut up in the Canadian Arctic. I spent a lot of times in the different parks of the Canadian Rockies, and I spent a lot of time in the snow, of course.
Yeah.
Which was to me almost unbelievably cold. But I spent a lot of time well below 20 degrees. Minus 20 degrees Celsius. But again, it was great. I loved it. And I went to Yellowstone in winter, where this bison was photographed. And also I traveled to parts of South America, like these pumas were taken in Torres del Paine in Chile.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to say is my main interest, wildlife-wise, was big mammals, big
Okay.
and bears. As I said, I was totally in love with bears. This is a spirit bear, which is a very rare white variety, as you know, that only occurs in the coastal rainforests of British Columbia.
Yeah.
And the one on the right is a grizzly bear in the Yukon, where there's a river that stays flowing well into late November.
Okay.
And the bears, unusually, they usually, as we all know, they hibernate.
Yes.
But they stay awake well into the winter because they take advantage of the salmon that's still occur in the flowing river. And I also loved northern birds, particularly it was great for me coming from Spain to see the breeding shorebirds that we in Europe only see in their winter plumage. It was great going to the high Arctic and see the phalaropes in full breeding color, for example, or the king eiders. It was great. And as I said, I love the tundra. I love these wide open spaces where birds have to survive with almost no vegetable cover. And it was. And I also spent a lot of time in Morocco, which is very close to Spain, and I spent actually years gathering material for a book I did on the birds of Morocco.
Yeah.
Birds
That
that
has been translated in
Sorry?
a couple of other languages as well, right?
Excuse me?
That has been translated to other languages too, right? Your book?
Well, that book was published in Spanish, French, English, and Arabic. So there were 4 different editions. And you can see, this is the English cover, which is a desert eagle owl, also known as pharaoh eagle owl.
Yeah.
And finally, the Arabian publisher told me that we had to change the cover for the Arabian edition because the owl in the Arabic culture, it's a bad omen.
Yeah.
bird, and
Yeah.
it's very unpopular.
Yeah.
So for the Arabic and French editions, we used a falcon, which again, in the Arabic culture, is a bird of good luck
Yeah.
and majesty. And so yeah, this was so I spent a lot of time again in deserts and rocky mountain ranges and very open spaces with usually very sparse vegetation. Okay.
Okay.
And then, due to a series of circumstances, I
Mm-hmm.
moved to Panama. I found myself living this was 6 years ago,
Oh,
and I
great.
found myself living in the heart of the of the neotropical rainforest, which
Wow.
was a very new environment for me. Ironically, being from Spain, I had spent very, very little time in Latin America, in South and Central America. And I mean, ironically, because of the language. I mean, being from Spain, whenever you go to South America or Central America, you feel very much at home, both
Okay.
culturally and the language and everything. But I had spent very little time there. And
Okay.
when I arrived, I became completely uh, enamored with hummingbirds. And what I want to stress here is the big difference, the big contrast between the big North American mammals,
Yeah.
these tiny, and I mean tiny.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's difficult to imagine if you haven't seen them live. It's hard to imagine how small they really are. I mean,
Yeah.
many of them, of course, there are so many species,
Yes.
and they range from larger than a house sparrow to the smaller bird in the world.
Yeah.
But they are very small, and they are absolutely incredible in every single aspect: the color, the behavior, everything.
Yeah.
So this was the big change for me is I started paying attention to the smaller things,
Mm-hmm.
both bird-wise with the hummingbirds, and my
Mm-hmm.
big discovery, and which has changed. I mean, not changed, because I'm still very interested in mammals, of course, and whenever I have a chance, I will, I photograph anything big I can find.
Yeah.
But in the neotropics, big animals are not very abundant, and they
Okay.
are very, very elusive. They usually live
Okay.
deep in the rainforest. They're mostly nocturnal, and it's
Yeah.
unless, with the exception of some monkeys and a few other things, but there is no megafauna in
Okay.
the neotropics easy to photograph. So I switched my interest, and I started paying attention to the smaller things. And one of my biggest discoveries was
Ooh.
frogs. I've always been very interested in reptiles and amphibians.
Okay.
As a kid, it was my first interest, because it's the one thing that when you're very young, when you're a kid and you don't even have binoculars and you go out in the country, that's the one thing you can actually find and touch, and
Yeah.
get very, very close access to. So when I arrived in Panama and I found out about this frog, I mean, believe it or not, this is one species of frog. All these images that I have been taking in the last 5-6 years are one single species, which is something absolutely amazing. This is the most polymorphic vertebrate in the world, meaning that one single species can show this almost unbelievable array of colors and designs.
Yeah.
And they live, well, this species actually lives from Nicaragua down to Panama, but it's only in Panama, and more specifically in the Caribbean archipelago of Bocas del Toro, that
Okay.
they reach this amazing variety. And this archipelago works as a kind of tiny Galapagos, in which
Okay.
every island and almost every islet, small islet, has a different variety of this frog. This is called the strawberry poison frog. Strawberry
Okay.
because the most well-known variety is red. is the very well-known blue jeans frog that so many people photograph in Costa Rica because that's the most common variety there. But as you go south and east from Costa Rica into Panama, you start finding this incredible variety, and I became
A
totally
master.
amazed by them. And I've spent a lot of time trying to find every single variety and photographing them. And this is just a sample. I mean, there are a few more color varieties that I haven't included in this collage, and there are still a few varieties that I haven't found, that I haven't seen yet. So they still keep me busy, and they're incredible, and it's so much fun to photograph them, and it's become a main point of interest. And what I've also found, and of course, every single macro photographer knows about this, but this was new for me, and is that how much you can experiment and play with light when you're working with tiny objects. Again, it's hard to imagine, and many people who see these frogs don't actually understand how small they are. I mean, these are tiny. They are the size of a fingernail, so they're much smaller than they look in the pictures. So being so small, it's very easy to create lightning scenarios with them.
Okay.
And as long as you use a reasonably large diffuser, which for a tiny frog can be, not very big, it's something you can easily carry with you in the field.
Okay.
You can experiment and create. You can be very creative with light, both at night, like this picture. This is a glass frog, a male glass frog taking care of his clutch of eggs.
Yeah.
This is taken at night, and this one is a Philobates bicolor poison arrow frog from Colombia, and this is taken during the day. This is taking advantage of natural light coming from here, and a touch of field flash, and in the very dark, naturally dark environment in the rainforest where they live in. And by the way, this is the second most poisonous vertebrate in the world. The poison in the skin of this little frog is more than enough to kill several men. So this is one of the few frogs that actually were used by Indians to poison their darts and their arrows. So again,
if I can ask you how close you were, or by frogs are, if you know that these are very poisonous, and did you ever had a experience of they coming towards you or jumping?
Not at all. I mean, they are poisonous, but their poison is in their skin. It's a purely defensive mechanism. They don't bite. I mean, even if they bite, they wouldn't be able to inoculate their venom. It's just protection against predators who would
Eat
die.
them.
Would die almost instantly if they try to eat them.
Okay.
So the only thing you have to do is, well, first of all, don't touch them.
Okay.
Unless it's strictly necessary, which almost never. And if you do, of course, wash your hands very thoroughly. Never touch your eyes. Never touch your face. Think of them as you would with COVID or something like that. And of course, it's best not to disturb them at all. Also, these frogs in particular, this one species is very, very endangered. They only subsist in a few pockets of forest up in the hills in the Chocó region of Colombia. Patches of forest that are too steep to be cultivated or turned into pasture. So yeah, it's quite sad, and you really have to hike uphill for many hours to reach the few places where they still live. And again, I mean, it's so much fun to photograph these little things. This is a glass frog. Again, you can see why they are called glass frogs. You
Yeah.
can see all their little innards through the very translucent skin. This is a rather common species in Panama, and they have the habit of calling during the breeding season, in the rain season. They like to call from the top of leaves that overhang moving, usually fast-flowing forest streams. It
Okay.
can be a lot of fun to look for them at night and photograph them, but it also requires walking inside rivers and getting wet. And but frogs in general, I have found to be the most addictive kind of photography almost ever since I started. It's like a second childhood for me,
Okay.
getting down in the mud. And well, this is one extreme
Oh my God.
of what we were talking about, size.
How do you even see it?
How I this this is a froglet. This is a species that doesn't go through the metamorphosis that we are so familiar with. Frogs
Okay.
usually lay eggs. From the
Yeah.
egg is a tadpole is born, and after a
Mhm.
while of a purely aquatic existence, they develop eggs and they get out. This species is born as a tiny froglet. They don't go through the tadpole stage.
Ooh.
And we found this little guy purely by chance when moving some leaf litter. And we saw it moving. And can you believe it? I mean, can you believe how really tiny it is? It's absolutely amazing. So this is an
No,
example
I'm
of
surprised. How do you even see it? I mean, in my eyes,
yeah.
that this is one segment of photography, macro. This tiny steps, maybe my eyesight, or maybe I'm not used to it. It's so difficult to spot. And when you said tiny, smaller than fingernail and all, I never thought that this can be this small.
Well, this is an extreme case, okay? I mean,
Okay.
the and again, it's a baby. It's a baby. Even
Yeah.
when they're adult, they're not very big.
Big.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think this is it
Amazing.
for the basic presentation that I had. But what I wanted to illustrate with this is this journey that you were mentioning that
Yeah.
has gone from the big North
Big.
American mammals to the tiniest possible
Yeah.
vertebrate that you can find. Um, and macro photography has been a big discovery, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm running workshops in Panama, and actually this frog that I was mentioning, this is a
Yeah.
big attraction. I mean, people from all over the world come to see this, to see as many varieties as possible within a 10-day trip. So
I'm looking it.
yeah. So right now I'm running both bird watching trips and amphibian watching trips, and of course general nature and photography tours in Panama, which
Okay.
is a hidden gem of the Americas.
Mhm.
It's very similar, as you know, it's right next to Costa Rica, but
Yeah.
tourism in Panama has never been very, very strong. And
Mm-hmm.
Panama does not have this feel that some people complain about Costa Rica, that some of the parks look like a theme park these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you very often find too many tourists in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
And also the photography is quite different in Panama. Costa Rica has been doing this for for decades. And a lot of the bird and wildlife photography in Costa Rica is done at feeders
Mm-hmm.
and at lodges that attract wildlife. And many times you only have to sit down and let the birds come to you. Whereas in Panama, this is not the case. Even though there are a few feeders for hummingbirds and other birds, most of the photography is field photography. I mean, you really
Mm-hmm.
have to go out in the field and get your boots wet and muddy to get good images. But it's a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying myself very, very much.
That's
Yeah.
great.
As I said, I don't know. I'm usually okay. How do I get out of here?
Okay. Now, if we are going into the presentation or going into the Q&A.
I don't know. Whatever you want. As I said, I'm usually better at answering questions than
And
just talking about myself.
yeah, I
But
think if we can start with your, because you are in Panama, and if
yeah,
your focus is mainly in Panama, so if you can give us a little more insight about what you can do in Panama, along with some images. If you have a bunch more collection to share with us, and some stories, some interesting or the most interesting moments so far in your last year's journey, at least a few of them, if you can share.
sure. Okay. As we were talking about hummingbirds, and
Yeah.
they are just an endless source of amazement. They
Mm-hmm.
are so active. Apart from the obvious attractive colors and shapes and size,
Mm-hmm.
they're always, I mean, they are so brave. They are afraid of nothing. They're almost constantly quarreling with with
Yes.
another. They are hyperactive, as you know, and uh,
Yeah.
and usually, I mean, as long as you don't do anything silly around them, they're very
Mm-hmm.
approachable. They will get close to you. They will behave very normally, just a few yards from your camera. So it's just great to see them interact and behave. It's just wonderful. And also, when you go deep in the forest, you have wonderful bird species. You have
Mm-hmm.
this is a bicolored antbird. Antbirds are
I don't see the image now. I think you can close the current version and reshare it once
I'm
again.
sorry.
I'm still seeing the frog images.
You're seeing the front. Okay, okay. Let's
Yeah, yeah. So maybe you need to close that and
close
share it again.
and share again. Okay, so
Yes,
share screen again.
the same steps. It's just
Hello. No, not
uh,
yet.
no, not yet. It's just uh, the screen with um, the talk which is you have shared now. So if it is a presentation and if it is a full screen, you will not be able to share it. You need to share it, then make it full screen.
This is
Sorry.
sorry. No, I am sorry.
Yeah, but I
Share
would love to
screen.
see your, Panama images
Your
more.
browser has blocked your screen. Your address. I can't believe this. Click the screen icon on your share the screen.
Yeah.
Why is oh okay.
It's okay.
Select window or screen.
Yeah, one of it is fine. If it is window, you can directly go to the particular window. Yeah.
Are you
Yes.
seeing it now? Are you
Yes. Yes.
seeing it? Ah,
Yes.
okay. So the whole rant I did before about hummingbirds was illustrating this this photo. This is a snowy-bellied hummingbird confronting a bigger white-necked Jacobin. As I said, they are completely fearless, and they
Yeah.
will happily confront not only bigger hummingbirds, but even birds of prey and whatever they think is a threat to their favorite perch or their feeding area or their nest. This is another snowy-bellied hummingbird, which is one of the most common and frequently seen species in Panama.
Uh-huh.
Owls. There are some wonderful species of owl. This is the reddish color morph of the
Mm-hmm.
Costa Rican pygmy owl that
Okay.
can be found both in the highlands shared by Costa Rica and Panama.
Okay.
Um, this
Yeah.
Okay, this is a flame ramped tanager, a male and a female. having an argument. I'm not sure if it's a friendly one or otherwise. Again, birds can be very tame, especially in the highlands
Okay.
places, which is something wonderful to see. Again, coming from Spain, where birds are usually very, very afraid of people, it's
Yeah.
just, so much fun to enjoy birds up close that are behaving normally. This is the female of the white-throated mountain gem, which is this is the male, which is
Wow.
a rather relatively common and frequently seen species in the highlands.
Uh-huh.
Beautiful, so such a beautiful, beautiful bird.
They are.
And there are also mammals in Panama. This is one of the most frequently seen ones, which is almost endemic to Panama. It's
Okay.
also found in a small area of Colombia, but it's a very Panamanian little mammal. It's a Geoffrey's tamarin, and there are a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I've never seen something like this before. This is the first time I'm seeing this one.
Tiny, they're so much fun. They're so much fun. They're really very small. They're the size of a squirrel.
Okay.
And yeah. Well, you have Pikmi owls in Canada, and how it works. They have these false eyes in the back of their heads that they use to fool the myriads of small birds that whenever they see them during the daytime, they come to mob them
Yeah.
and try to chase them away from their territory. So they have these two false eyes to fool, I think, both predators and small birds. And the good thing about hummingbirds is there are so many of them, and they are so approachable that you can experiment with so many different types of photography. You've probably heard of multi-flash, which is a
I've
technique.
heard of multi-flash, but I've never tried. I mean, for me, hummingbird is very new, and I'm
Mhm.
starting to explore in this part of the world. I'm new to Canada itself, so I've
Yeah,
seen
well,
some.
you have a few. You have few species of hummingbird in Canada, but they're very beautiful, very beautiful.
They are.
Yeah, and well, these little guys again. You can experiment with so many different types of illumination, and this is a high-speed photograph taken using flash as the only light.
Okay.
That's the way you can freeze the movement of the wings, which otherwise would be a total blur.
Yeah.
And multi-flash is a popular way of photography that requires a lot of gear. So what we do is we have all the heavy gear. So the photographer that comes wanting to photograph them has only to bring the camera and maybe the flashes if he wants. Although we keep flashes in stores so we can lend them.
Okay.
This is one of the small. I think this is the smallest hummingbird in Central America and one of the smallest in the world, of course. It's a scintillant hummingbird, a male. And they are almost unbelievably small. You wouldn't believe how tiny they are when you see them. And it's relatively common in some areas of the highlands. Sloths are very common. Is the most frequently seen mammal during the day in all throughout Panama. And they seem to be especially abundant in places with human population. I imagine because there are very few predators around people. So they feel quite safe around villages and towns. And actually, you see them very often crossing roads.
I've seen some videos.
Yes, it's very frequent. And the police, you will always, I mean, is one of these staples in the evening news in the local TV stations. The police stopping the traffic, and sometimes you have to grab them if it's a wide road and you see them starting to close. It's to grab them and give them a hand so they can cross safely to the other side. And this is the three-toed, as you can see, the brown-throated three-toed sloth, and this is the other species, which is the two-toed sloth. And these ones are a little more nocturnal, so there are not not seen
Seen.
as often as the other ones. More hummingbirds. I mean, you can take amazingly close photographic to hummingbirds because, as I said, they can be very fearless. And
Yeah.
once they get used to people, they will let you get very, very close. So you can take some, some very nice, almost macro shots of hummingbirds. Another very nice species that also occurs in Costa Rica, but it's almost never photographed there.
Okay.
It's the fiery-billed aracari. This is a small toucan
Yeah.
that lives in very noisy family groups, and it lives in the lowland forests of the Pacific slope in Panama. And there are a couple of spots where it's quite reliable to see them up close, and it's possible to take some very nice pictures. And this is the Mantle howler monkey, which is the biggest primate. No, not the biggest. I think the spider monkeys are bigger. But it's quite common, and it's relatively easy to see. They feed almost exclusively on leaves, which means funnily and a little sad also. Monkeys that feed on leaves are not very tasty, for people. So there's never been a tradition of hunting these monkeys. So they are quite relaxed and easygoing around people, whereas fruit-eating monkeys are routinely eaten, sadly, by in rural areas. Not so much in Panama, but throughout South America, big fruit-eating monkeys are very difficult to approach because they're terrified, and with good reason, because people eat them all the time. This is the fiery-billed aracari again. And this is one of my favorite birds. This tiny thing, it's colored redstart, and it's exclusive to the highlands shared by Costa Rica and Panama. It lives in mountain forests, and is one of the most characteristic birds of this place. They are usually quite fearless as well, and it's I don't know. I'm just in love with them. It's the bird you will almost always see when you go for a walk in the cloud forests, which are a wonderful habitat. And finding these guys is such a big bonus whenever you take a forest walk. This is very typical of them. They will look at you like you're some kind of big, slow, ponderous cow or something like that. So hyperactive, and they live at such speed that I imagine that's how they see us. And this is a green-crowned brilliant. It's a medium-sized hummingbird, also from the highlands. And this is one of the tiny ones. This is a volcano hummingbird. They live in as the name implies, they're usually near the peaks of the volcanoes in Panama. We have a couple of quite high volcanoes. And the hillsides of these volcanoes are covered in what we call elfin forest, which is usually dark forest with lots of lichen and moss, and this is the habitat of these little guys. I mean, we could go on,
But, I can see
hummingbirds
that.
are great. You have deep forest birds like these antbirds. You can see the big eye. That tells
I look completely
that
different.
it's a bird that lives in very dark conditions in the deep rainforest where very little light reaches the ground. And these birds follow ant swarms. They don't actually feed on the ants, but they feed on all the creatures that the ants scare away. So they follow the ant swarms, eating the insects that run away from the ants. And here's the tamarin again. and sloths, and I mean there's so much to photograph. I've also become very adept at night photography, which is something I rarely ever did before. And there are some very interesting mammals that come only at night. This is
Oh,
a cacomisl, which is a relative of the raccoon,
okay.
strictly nocturnal.
Uh-huh.
And well, of course, you have what everybody wants to see when they come to the rainforest in the Neotropics, which is the Harpy Eagle, you know. And every year there are at least a couple of nests that you can visit. They're usually in land owned and controlled by indigenous communities, and they
Okay.
have found a very good and steady income
Income source.
source
Yeah,
in protecting these nests so they can be visited.
that's
And
good.
of course, many people from all over the world. I mean, these days, Panama is the one place where you are almost guaranteed to see Harpy Eagle. Yeah,
That's great.
yeah, it is. It is great. And I mean, we could go on, frankly, forever. Cut me whenever you want.
No, I mean, thank you so much. This was really an experience. I've seen. I thought the talk was mainly going to focus on the big mammals and explode into, the frogs were a surprise for me. Yes, Hermie mentioned that you are going to see a lot of variety in this conversation, and this is definitely. I think most of the species which you have shared over here, I have never seen it, only seen it in images. So thank you from my side for sure. That was
No,
really,
thank
really
you.
an experience.
And I mean, when you suggested as a topic the photographic journey,
Yeah,
I mean, it is a journey. I
it
mean,
is a
from
journey.
the big
Yes.
mammals, of North America and the cold north and the snows and the Rocky Mountains down to the highlands of Panama. It's such a almost, I mean, unbelievably different, but
Yeah,
I mean, both equally fascinating,
I
and
can imagine. Yes.
yeah. So yeah, big world and lots of things to do, and I mean, almost anywhere you go, you
Yeah.
can. And again, how I found out that just looking down on the ground, you often find amazing things that you could spend your whole life photographing.
Yep.
The ah, yep,
Thank you.
lots
Thank
of fun.
you.
No, thank you. Stop sharing. Yeah. Well,
I mean, if somebody would like to join you, I mean, including myself, definitely. I mean, I'm not sure when my school is going to get over, but I definitely would like to explore your side of the world and do
you'll be
some
very, very
frogs
welcome.
for
Very
sure.
welcome. Yeah, it really is a fun. Very. I mean, if you're a photographer, you're going to be very busy if you can visit Panama. But even if you're not, I mean, any nature lover will have a lot of stuff to do. Yeah.
That's
So
great.
I imagine you're going to share my Instagram. There you can
Yes.
find
Yes.
everything, all the data and all the contacts and everything.
Yeah. So yeah, anybody who is here, you can check in our Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram. We have shared Ignatius every details, so you can get in touch with him, and he can take you to see the mammals, to the birds, to the macros, to the most poisonous frog. I don't know. I'm like if I have to list the name of this species, it's impossible. But a wide variety of species, and he being a photographer, as you have seen the result, he will be able to teach you. Or
Yeah.
if you're already a photographer, you just need his assistance in exploring the place, you can also do that. So anyway, to learn or to explore the places, please do get in touch with Ignatius so that he can guide you. And
You will
on
be very welcome. Yeah.
thank you so much. Do you have any tips or any suggestions for upcoming photographers in line with photography? That is one question from one of our audience.
Well, I I would have a couple of tips on the things I've been discovering recently. Especially
Mhm.
macro photography. Well, but actually for any kind of wildlife photography, my biggest advice would be become really interested in animals and study their behavior even before you get into photography. You can usually tell which photographers are naturalists as well as photographers and which ones are not. I mean, in order to really capture behavior and really be able to be in the right place at the right moment, there's nothing, I mean, nothing can beat knowing and studying about the animals themselves. Nowadays, learning about photography is very straightforward.
Yeah.
And, you know, with all the tutorials in YouTube, with everything that's written on digital photography, it's quite easy. I mean, the learning curve is not much these days. You know, learning to use your gear shouldn't be too hard for anyone.
Yes.
Whereas really knowing about animals, regardless of what you're interested in, would be another tip. Find a subject you really love. And get to know it well. Get to know it very well, and that will guarantee you get great images. That might contradict a little what I've been talking about, because I've been interested about so many things throughout my photographic career or life, or whatever you want to call it. But if you specialize in something, you will get much better. And
that's true.
It really pays getting to know something very well. And you know, concentrating on that. That's what I'm doing with frogs right now. Of course, I keep doing birds and everything I can photograph, but frogs are becoming almost an obsession now, and I'm having a lot of fun. That's how you really get to enjoy things and getting good photographs. And of course, you know, gear. I mean, we could talk endlessly about gear, but as I said, that's something I can, you know, you can just learn about it. You know, going into YouTube and reading. There's so much written nowadays, luckily, you know, and so many people, so many good photographers sharing their thoughts and their impressions on gear and equipment. So, yeah.
So is there any favorite piece of equipment you would, I mean, you found in your journey?
I switched from Canon to Olympus about 5 years ago now. And I'm not looking back. I'm very happy. So I switched from full frame to micro four thirds system. So I'm working with a much smaller sensor now. But frankly, and believe me, I'm not affiliated with Olympus in any way. I'm not sponsored by them. They don't give me anything for free. But I haven't been able to see any major disadvantages against full frame. Again, keep in mind that the kind of photography I do, and the only aspect in which full frame is still superior is very high ISO values, and I mean very high. But with the recently released softwares, anti-noise softwares, both from Topaz and from DxO, even that is becoming almost, you know, negligible. So I'm very happy with micro four thirds, especially if you would like to go hiking with your gear. If you like to go deep in the forest and in muddy places, I don't carry a tripod anymore. I don't carry big, heavy, long lenses anymore, and I'm extremely happy with what I'm using. Yeah. But I would also advise to people who are starting is don't get lost in technology. And this is something I used to do a lot. And recently I have been selling a lot of old equipment that I had and practically never used. You know, when you start in photography, you want to photograph everything. You start buying lenses and accessories and gadgets and stuff that you will, you know, end up probably not using. So again, try to focus on what you really like to do. And then invest in one good lens, one good flash. I'm talking about macro photography here. One good lens, one good flash, and one good flashlight diffuser that suits your style of photography. And with those three things, plus of course the camera, you will do a lot of stuff. I mean, you will find yourself able of doing almost everything.
Okay.
Yeah, and you will be able to travel light, which is
That's the biggest thing, especially if
that's a
you
big
have
luxury.
hiking.
That's a big
Yeah.
luxury.
The moment it is about hiking, every step you make, every small element can add more stress on you, the walking
Right.
part.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. All right. So I think, yeah, we have Nick Ive, you said beautiful. Abnishan mentioned it's again wonderful. Then and I have I think I don't understand the next one. It's a different language altogether. But then um, there are so many thanks messages for your informations you have shared, and the images and the stories. I think, yeah, we don't have much more questions as of now. If you would like to add something to round it up, if what will be your comment?
I think I've said everything I
Shared
can think
everything.
of, really. Uh, Again, you have my Instagram. If anyone has any
Yes.
question about anything, I'm always happy to answer. Yeah, anything.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And
Thank
thanks a
you.
lot. Yeah, and I will definitely, because there were few questions from a couple of our guests about South American side. I can definitely give you details, and they can get in touch with you.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Always happy to be in touch.
yeah, we'll do that. Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much once again.
Thank you, and season's greetings to everyone.
Yeah. Right. So that was Ignacio and his amazing journey as a photographer from the big mammals to the small world. And I hope you all enjoyed it and I learned something from it. I have seen a lot of animals which I have never seen, only in pictures. So South America is quite a fascinating place and a lot to see in this part of the world. Hoping to explore more once I finish with my schools. I think before Christmas, I don't think we are going to see again or New Year. So wish you all a great season or in advance, Happy New Year and Merry Christmas. You all please take care. Don't forget, we still have the new version of this COVID. So make sure you have your vaccination, and if you're going out, taking care of your safety measurement, and please, please, please be safe. Thank you, Mendoza. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here with us. And I hope you have learned at least something from this beautiful conversation. And I think we have one more talk before New Year, if I'm not wrong. I'm not sure when the day is going to be. Hermes is going to share the details soon. So till then, take care, stay safe. Lots of love from Edmonton. Bye bye.